Family and friends, as we start services, I would ask you to kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices or place them on silent. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Committed father to Deb and to David, a doting grandfather to Cameron, Bianca, Christopher, and Brandon, a husband for over 66 years to Essie, who told me that Alvin Freedman, a man she met when she was 19 years old, was completely devoted to her. She reflected with me that when he was in the service back in the day on the other side of the world, I believe it was in Japan, he wrote to her every single day. He told her every single day how much he loved her and how beautiful she was to him, only getting more beautiful as the years passed. And I did not know Alan life, only coming into relationship with this family yesterday upon getting the call from the funeral home and hearing the news of his passing on Wednesday afternoon. I did, though, get to spend time speaking with the members of his immediate family, Essie, Deb, and David, who shared with me their senses of the man that he was, his passions, his athleticism, his sense of humor, his slight love of Penn State and Penn State football, and more. I learned about how hard he worked to ensure a comfortable life for his family. I learned about the pride he had at becoming a grandfather when Cam was born, taking, I believe you said, 36 photos per week. Was that right? For a year? 36, by the way, is an auspicious number. It's double chai, a good omen for a good life. I learned that Al was a unique man. Deb told me that he ate fire, juggled flaming bats, rode a unicycle, walked on glass. On that theme, David told me that he felt that his father might have preferred that this room have a silly energy, perhaps with clowns, and I'm very sorry to disappoint on that front, though my family may think you do have a clown here today. I learned that there was a time when Al would run 4 miles every morning, that he could run longer than a marathon, that he played tennis and racquetball and spent hours and days tossing a ball with his son, David, as David grew into his love and skill at baseball. Lastly, I learned about his love of Rocky, and particularly the Rocky theme, Gonna Fly Now. I shared with Deb when we spoke, I don't think I told you this, Essie, that it's a bit beshert that I should be the rabbi who got the call. It means something to me. One of my fondest life memories was when I was in high school. I was a bass trombone player, and got to stand behind Maynard Ferguson, the screaming trumpet player, who made Gonna Fly Now famous, backing him as that was performed in an auditorium in my hometown. So that song also holds special resonance for me, and I smile every time I hear it. Now, the Jewish world right now stands in an in-between period between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, one of the most auspicious times of the year. Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. Each year on these holidays, we recite a piece of liturgy called Unatana Tokef, a pretty well-known and frightening prayer that indicates that at this time of the year, as we're judged, God decrees who shall live and who shall die in the year ahead. It ends with a line of redemption saying that through repentance, prayer, or justice work, those things will lessen the severity of the decree. So if one believes that it can be decreed who shall live and who shall die in the year ahead, what do we make of the fact that people die at various points throughout that year? And the sages ask that question, and it's seen in the Jewish tradition that someone who dies on or around around Rosh Hashanah are to have merited a little bit of an extra gift, a gift of some extra time to be born, to be pass at the season of renewal. It means they've lessened in their life the severity of the decree. Perhaps we can see this as a merit to the man that Alvin was, despite the pain of this loss. Our Jewish tradition teaches as well that the physical body is temporary, but the soul is eternal. So today, we gather for sacred purpose to pray for full and complete rest for Alvin's body. And we focus on the fact that his soul, even in death, remains bound to the bond of life, to each of you. And we seek blessing for the continued elevation of his soul. May our time together today have purpose and meaning, and may it honor well the memory of Alvin Freedman, Avraham ben Binyamin Vechana, who passed away on Wednesday. My name's Rabbi Nathan Weiner. I'm the Director of Jewish Outreach and Engagement here for the Jewish Federation. It's an honor truly on behalf of myself, my family, and the Jewish people to be present with each of you today. And there are two mitzvot that we're going to be performing together today. The first we're in the midst of right now, and it's called Kavod Hamet, honoring the deceased. And for most of our time together today until the conclusion at graveside, at Montefiore, we keep our kavanah, our intention on Al's memory. Closer to the conclusion, graveside, we transition to the mitzvah of Nichum Avelim, of comforting the mourners, as they prepare to recite the mourner's Kaddish for the first time as an elevation of his soul. Once again, greetings to those here in person. We also extend greetings to those joining us remotely on the stream. I heard that there are people viewing from Florida and from other places as well, and your presence is felt here in this chapel. The family wishes you could be here personally, but understands and receives your greeting as well. Welcome. So again, more formally, Alvin Freedman is survived by his wife Estelle, Essie, his two children, his daughter Deb, and Deb's husband Mike, and his son David, his grandchildren, Cameron and his fiancée Ariel, Mazel Tov on your engagement, Bianca, Christopher, and Brandon. May your care for one another and support for one another, God willing, carry you through this difficult loss. It's customary at moments of grief to offer words of Tehillim, of Psalms. I'm going to read Psalm 23, a psalm universal across the Abrahamic faith traditions at moments of loss and grief. And I'll recite it in Hebrew, followed by a standard English translation. If you'd like to and are comfortable, you're welcome to recite any or some or none of it with me, first in Hebrew, followed by the English. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai ro'i lo achsar, binotesha yarbitzeni al mei menuchoti nahaleni, nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo, gam ki elech b'getz al mavet lo irara ki atay madi, shiftecha mishantecha hema yenachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged zorai, tishanta v'shemen roshi kosi ravaya, ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orach yamim. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Amen. An additional reading from Kohelet, Ecclesiastes: there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them up, a time to embrace and a time to refrain, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time for speaking. This is certainly a time for speaking, as words are offered in eulogy or a hesped to uphold the kavod, the honor of Alvin. And for this we invite up his son, David, to share some words.
My dad's theme song. So my dad, I know, wouldn't want me to wear a suit and tie. He wanted me to wear this game-used Pete Rose jersey that he got me. So I'm wearing it today. So I learned a lot of really important lessons from my dad. First lesson was the most accurate way to tell time, and it wasn't from a Swiss watch. It was from counting chimpanzees. So my dad could often be heard counting 1 chimpanzee, 2 chimpanzee, 3 chimpanzee if he was timing me in something. So my dad taught me the most accurate way to tell time. The rabbi talked very briefly about my dad running, and we had this 4-mile loop right near our house, and he would do that. This was back just when kind of running was becoming popular in the 70s, and running 4 miles was kind of a big deal at that time. And every once in a while, he would do that loop twice. He'd do 8 miles, and it seemed like an amazing accomplishment at that time. Well, one day my dad was gone for several hours, and he came back, and he said to us that he ran 28 miles, which kind of back then, like, you know, there was no internet. You didn't really hear about ultra marathons or anything. And I remember saying to my dad, "Oh, come on, Dad, you're going to run 20. How'd you do 28 miles? And he said to me, "I never thought of it. As running 28 miles. I just thought of it as running 4 miles 7 times. And I've run 4 miles thousands of times. So that's all I did, was 4 miles 7 times. And I've written a lot of things since then, and I never forgot that. And I wrote what I call this law of success, called the law of smallness, and it's really helped me throughout my life. And I learned that from my dad, and it goes like this: conquering a mountain is nothing more than climbing a series of small and manageable hills, one after another. And I learned from my dad that any large, daunting task can be broken up into small and manageable pieces. And that has helped me do some things I never thought I could do. My dad also taught me that it's very important before you really like get into exercise or doing something really difficult, the importance of warming up properly. Now, if you knew my dad, he only knew one way to warm up. And the way that he taught me how to warm up was by eating fire. So that's how Dad taught me that, how to warm up. Taught me a bunch of other things, too. So now that I'm warmed up, I'll kind of get into what I wanted to say. So it's September 20th, 23 as I write this. My dad passed away today. He had turned 91 back on August 2nd. He was my hero growing up. He was like Babe Ruth, Wilt Chamberlain, and Joe Namath, all wrapped up into one to me. He was also an avid runner, which rubbed off on me too. He gave me the most wonderful childhood. He even sat for 4 hours and 31 minutes on Labor Day weekend when I was 12 and counted me jumping 34,603 times on my pogo stick as I chased after a Guinness World Record. Afterwards, when several newspapers were doing an article about my world record chase, they asked my father if I would try for the record again. And of course, my dad would respond in no other way like this. My dad replied, "I'll break his neck if he tries again. What other idiot father would spend Labor Day weekend counting 34,600 pogo stick jumps for his son?" Yes, my dad was a real jokester and really enjoyed life. So baseball was my first love growing up. And even though we weren't rich, my dad made me feel like the richest kid in the world when he got me a pitching machine and batting cage in my backyard. I felt like my whole childhood in that batting cage. 500 balls every day, sometimes 1,000, and I felt like just the richest, happiest kid in the world back there. My bedroom growing up was known as Little Cooperstown Baseball Hall of Fame, as every inch of the walls, door, and even my ceiling were covered with game-used Major League bats, jerseys, hats, autographed balls, and more that he got from me. There's a whole long and entertaining story how he got those things for me. I think probably too much for the time we have here to get into it, but it's quite a story and something only my dad could pull off. For those of you who didn't know my dad real well, he was quite a character, and as you could see by all the pictures that were on display out there, he loved to juggle flaming balls, baseball bats, tennis rackets, and more. He liked to call himself the amazing, blazing Al. And he especially loved to entertain kids. He loved kids. He also really loved dogs, too. And I'd always wanted a dog, as did my sister. And, well, it's kind of hard. We'd constantly beg my mom and dad for a dog. And they weren't budging for a while there. We were really young. And, well, one day, me and my dad were out for a bike ride. And there was this place not too far down the street called the Cowtail Bar, and also Holly Ravine, they called it. I don't know why I had two names. But anyway, we're out for a bike ride, and I don't know why, they had a little, kind of petting zoo. My dad asked me, would you like a chicken? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to have a chicken. So we came home with a pet chicken. And I would spend hours in the backyard playing with that chicken. And, well, one day my mom, when I was in the backyard playing with that chicken, got a phone call from one of her friends. And they asked, oh, how's David? What's he up to? And then my mom said to her friend, well, he's out playing with a chicken. And, well, she felt kind of funny saying that her son was busy playing with a chicken, and then talked to my dad and said, I think we need to get the kids a dog now. So anyway, I still remember that day. My elementary school was about a block or two from home, and there was this long sidewalk that you'd walk down to when it was time to leave, and I still can see my dad walking towards me with that dog on a leash that my sister named Geezer. So my dad added to it, though. His official name was Geezer Lionel Freedman the First. So it was always fun when we'd go to the vet and they'd ask what his name was and say, Geezer Lionel Freedman the First. So anyway, my dad loved that dog too. I can still see him sitting on the floor in our living room with that, sorry Mom, that god-awful orange couch. So anyway, my dad loved dogs, and this dog that we had, Geezer, he was just crazy. He just loved to run, and my dad would sit on the floor in the living room, and I remember he'd beat on the floor like a drum, and he'd be going, go, go, woo, woo, and banging on the floor. And Geezer would start in the living room. He had this little course through the house. He'd race around the dining room table. Into the kitchen, you'd hear his paws kind of scraping along the linoleum floor. Into the rec room, jump up on the back of the couch, back into the living room, and would do a couple more loops. And anyway, my dad just loved that dog, and I thank my parents for getting us that dog as well. So just a lot of great memories. Most of all, though, besides that, he was an incredibly loving husband, as the rabbi had said, and he loved my mom right up until the end. She repeatedly told me as the end was coming near how Dad would say to her that he loved her, even though, probably didn't have much else breath in him to say anything else. And so he was an incredibly loving husband to my mom, and incredibly loving father to both my sister and I. And I'm so grateful for the time I had with him. He wasn't perfect, but he was the perfect dad for me. Thank you.
It's with these thoughts and memories and dedications in mind that we move to the central prayer of a Jewish memorial service, El Malei Rachamim, which asks that our soul be granted true rest on the wings of God's divine presence. If you're physically able, I invite you to please rise. I'll read it first in the English, followed by chanting in the Hebrew. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the divine presence in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as a resplendence of the firmament to the soul of Alvin Freedman, who has gone to his eternal home. For charity has been donated in remembrance of his soul. May his place of rest be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the All-Merciful One shelter him with the cover of God's wings forever and bind his soul in the bond of life. Adonai is his heritage. May he rest in his resting place in peace, and let us say, Amen. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Al Kanfei Hashchina, B'Ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Avraham ben Binyamin Vechana, Shehalach Le'olamo, Ba'avor Shenadvu Tzadaka, Ba'ad Hazkarat Nishmato, Began Eden Tehe Menuchato, Lechen Bal Harachamim Yastirehu Beseter Kenafav Le'olamim, Bitzror Hachayim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach Al Mishkavo B'Shalom, V'nomar, Amen. Please be seated. Our time together here at the chapel is drawing to a close. Shortly, we're going to make our way in processional to Montefiore in Jenkintown for interment. The family asks that donations in lieu of flowers please be made to a charity of your choice.
Start to head back towards our vehicles. We can start to get ready to go to the cemetery. For those of you who are going, we're going to hand you out directions when you're in your car and we're in the processional lines. I'm going to recommend everyone use the restroom before we leave as well. Okay. Would you like directions? Okay. So we'll still give you directions, then you can depart in your own time. I just want to let you know that we do have a time frame, and they are expecting us at a certain time. So if we can just go immediately there, that would be great. Perfect. Just wanted to double check. You're going to print them out and give them to you in just 1 moment. Yes. Okay, I'll make sure to get one.
You're welcome.
Yeah, they're